some guy on Twitter posted an image of, Palestinians as insects, vermin to be crushed under the boot of the IDF. I mean, Israel has had the backing of European military powers for quite some time. Mm-hmm. But I think what Hamas wants is they want short-term political power, immediate control, and they want to inflict pain against the people that they view as oppressing them. Before, it was Western powers were sort of the only people willing to work with Israel.
Yeah.
But now, with the rise of the Gulf states and the oil economies in the region, there's far more willingness to engage between the Gulf states, the Sunni Gulf states, and Israel. The reason that the quality of life is so bad in Gaza is not the fault of the people in Gaza. It's the fault of the people who systematically deny them access to basic infrastructure.
There's a vision to it. Not everyone's trying.
What is possible within Zionism, so we have an understanding what Zionism is.
Yeah. Okay.
Zionism is not explicitly just the right-wing sort of hegemonic vision for what Israel is. I mean, now they've cut off electricity.
Yeah.
They've cut off road access. They, the amount of control and leverage that Israel has in that situation.
Yeah.
The question of, would Palestinians want to live in a pluralistic, secular Israel?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to. I don't think it's something like where the one-state solution idea, that's dead. Dead in the water.
It's dead in the water.
It's not even...
Now there's no possibility of going back to it?
It seems like there's not even a possibility of going back to it.
Welcome to DYNT News. We are back with another episode. I think in the last episodes we explained to you how the setup of Israel was, what's the history of Israel as the land. And then we also took another episode to explain to you what India's stance is in the conflict that we are seeing currently. Today we apply a different lens to it. We apply we see what the conflict is, what the conflict is not. It's there's a lot of misconceptions in the market about what is the origination of this conflict. So we have with us Jack Quain. Jack is a graduate student at Harvard Divinity, and Jack will tell us further about what it is and what's not. So
I think right now a lot of what's going on in the media currently it's the perpetuation of this notion that there's a war going on in Palestine currently. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't necessarily call it a war. It's very one-sided at the moment. Hamas committed horrible atrocities.
Yeah.
They went into Israeli territory and committed crimes against Israeli citizens there.
Yeah.
It's a horrible tragedy. That does not justify the scale of what we're seeing. So I think...
As retaliation.
Yes. So I think a lot of the time, conflicts like these are painted to be between two equal sides. And that's not the case.
Reality.
No. Nor do I think it's reality a lot of the time.
Yeah. Since the whole conflict arrived in 1947... Is that always been the case or no? When did Israel started becoming this more powerful?
Israel has had the backing of European military powers for quite some time. Mm-hmm. I would say throughout the mid-20th century, Israel's political, economic, and military influence in the region has only grown.
Yeah.
To the point where now it stands as a modern economy in the Levant region.
Yeah.
Though, things have significantly changed since that time in the sense of, who's willing to work with Israel in the region.
Yeah.
Before, it was Western powers were sort of the only people willing to work with Israel.
Yeah.
But now, with the rise of the Gulf states and the oil economies in the region, there's far more willingness to engage between the Gulf states, the Sunni Gulf states, and Israel. So that's another area where the conflict has definitely changed, and one of the reasons we find ourselves now in the particular pickle we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in that, so explain to us, like, what's the religious, like, what are the differences between, like, we were discussing, I think I'm slightly moving off topic here, but, like, we were also discussing about how the one-state solution could have been, which you say, like, a lot of Zionists, as we know, you were saying to me that they also support in their own ways No.
I think what's happening is you sort of took the example I gave of what's possible, and you're carrying with that as in that's something powerful and like narratively,
No, it's not powerful at all.
It's not powerful at all, and
I'm just trying to say that there's a vision to it. Not everyone's like trying.
What is possible within Zionism, so you have an understanding of what Zionism is.
Yeah. Okay.
Zionism is not explicitly just the right wing sort of hegemonic vision for what Israel is. In terms of the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians.
Yeah.
In terms of the ultra orthodox, having major influence in politics and in culture.
Yeah.
That's a brand of Zionism, but it's not Zionism per se.
Yeah.
And so I think when a lot of people critique Zionism, they're critiquing that sort of image of it. Right?
Okay.
And I'm not a Zionist myself.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to color the contours of
what have you seen.
This looks like.
What this.
But I wouldn't go so far as to say like, there are tons of people advocating for civil rights for Palestinians who bear the label Zionist proudly, but there are people who may be Zionist in some sense.
Yeah.
Or who do support the continued existence of a Jewish state in Israel.
Yeah.
But who also aren't,
extremists, like, kill them all.
Exactly.
Okay. So,
but I don't think it's something like where the one state solution idea, that's dead. Dead in the water.
It's dead in the water.
It's not even...
Now there's no possibility of going back to it?
It seems like there's not even a possibility of going back to it.
Okay.
Which, there's no good model, additionally, for what kind of society a one-state that would look like.
Yeah.
Where you have years and years and years of abusive,
how do they...
Some people call it apartheid. I'm going to, for the purposes of this is going on the internet, not call it apartheid particularly. But maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't had too many bets here. But
in a way, yeah.
There's no good answer for what reconciliation looks like.
Yeah.
In terms of if there were to be emerge a cosmopolitan, liberated state, nor is there the question of whether or not Palestinians would want to live in it.
That's
a question of national sovereignty.
Yeah.
Right. And
they want that. That's
what they want, right?
That's what their jam is.
Yeah, it's the idea of building national sovereignty.
Yeah.
And I have a question.
With due reason,
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying that it's with due reason that they have that. I was hearing this British Jewish historian. I forget. Oh, sorry, she was a journalist. Sorry, but she was saying this thing that the Jews need one island, one little piece, one little piece of land for them, and it's theirs, and it has been theirs before the idea of they were Palestinians. The whole identity of the Palestinians as Palestinians didn't develop before. It was the idea of Jews that's their holy land that developed before. She was these group of people were also nomadic tribes mostly, and they just lived there. They didn't have an unified identity. And when it moved in, it's the British who tried to create that because they didn't want this whole identity of a Jewish land being back to the Jews, because it was their territory, right? But the British owned it. So I mean, it's kind of like, who do I support, like, morally? Who do I support? Like, where do I reach? If you try to, like, reach, whose land is it?
Yeah.
I mean, like, how do I, like, where do we start from? And, like, where do we go from there? Can we, like, will the Palestinians, now they have their identity, will they ever want to live inside a Jewish state and not a secular state? So Israel has to be a secular state, which obviously
well, it can be a secular
defeats
state and a Jewish state. That's the thing.
So what you're saying is there are a lot of Zionists who want that.
Yeah, not all Zionists are religious Zionists.
Yeah.
So I think maybe an important distinction to make here is between Judaism, the religion, and Judaism, the ethnic group.
Yeah.
Because there are tons of Jews who practice Judaism but aren't necessarily religious, or maybe they are religious but they're not necessarily religious in the way that we might understand religiosity.
Mm-hmm.
I have tons of friends who, observe the high holy days and participate in a religious community with Jewish people, but who don't believe in God at all, and that's totally normal.
Yeah.
The whole
They're culturally Jewish. They celebrate
very much, but also participate in the religious rites.
Yeah.
Keep kosher.
Yeah,
because there is also
part of
there is to an extent a precedent in Judaism for disbelief.
Okay.
Right? So, when we talk about Judaism as a religion versus Judaism as an ethnic thing, it's not easy to separate them and just say, there are secular Jews and there are religious Jews.
Yeah.
It's that there's a spectrum of Judaism in which ethnicity and religion are all intertwined, and it's inseparable from the context in which it's being enacted now, which is the 21st century where people are living. And so, there's the possibility of a deeply secular polity in Palestine in the form of one state. Yeah. But then secular also does not necessarily mean tolerant. Yeah. As we know from some of our friends, France, India, the United States of America. The record of secular states doing well on human rights issues is, not particularly good. Yeah. Not that
there's a lot of bad apples.
Not that non-secular states are better, but that everybody's failing in a lot of ways. Yeah. But to go back to your point, where in history do we go back to? Who knows? Am I allowed to curse? Who fucking knows? Yeah. I don't know. That's the problem is, a lot of historians will be mad at me for saying this, but I think there's two ways to look at the past. Yeah. There's to look at the past as speaking and you give it reverence because of how it speaks. And then there's the way of looking at the past, which is the way I prefer, where you look back and you go, what a load of ding-dongs. And it helps you contextualize how everyone now is being a load of ding-dongs. So, yes, is there an extent to which Palestinian identity as a national identity calcified and became sort of more rigid through the ethnic cleansing that they were subjected to in the years following 1948? Yeah. Yes. Totally. Of course. That only makes sense that would happen. And but that doesn't discredit the fact that there are Palestinians now who self-identify as Palestinians. Who have a connection to the land, whose families, maybe if they would call themselves Palestinian or not, have lived there for hundreds of years, thousands of years. I mean, nomadic groups and Arabs have been living in the area mixed with other peoples for a very long time. Yeah.
And even if there was no established idea of Palestinians, it's still their land, even if their cultures within Palestinians slightly vary.
That's the thing. So 1948, in terms of nationalities, that's not, not a long time ago. True. Think about it, right?
Yeah. I'm slightly fascinated by this because obviously I personally don't know this well enough. I have not grown up around Jewish people, so I don't probably know their culture much or even their history at this point. But obviously, this conflict, rising up to the proportion it has, 3,200 or more people dead while we speak, and that's 9/11. That's how much 9/11 was 5,000, right? So it'll reach 9/11 levels.
You know, I was 3 when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
So in terms of my knowledge of the event, it's limited to that I was 3. So
See,
the
yeah,
exact casualties,
yeah.
thousands, was bad.
Yeah, so
Exact count.
so it's like big enough for me to like now
Yeah.
take interest in it. So
Yeah.
so and it's like okay, so there are people who within the Zionist community who would be very open about a secular state while maintaining their Jewish culture. That how many of the Palestinians would separate that? Would want a secular? Do you think there are voices within them also?
I mean, I think it's a moot point to ask right now what a future Palestinian state would look like.
But before this war was like,
I mean, I think the goal before this war was to end the cycle of abuse that Israel enacts upon Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank.
Yeah.
I mean, and the situation in Gaza is horrifying. You know, there are buildings that get blown up and then need to be rebuilt, but they can't buy cement because there's a blockade, so they have to rebuild them with mud. You know, the reason that the quality of life is so bad in Gaza is not the fault of the people in Gaza. It's the fault of the people who systematically deny them access to basic infrastructure.
Yeah.
I think so. That's the goal there, is to basically liberate the territory from the ongoing blockade.
Yeah.
So that it can get things like, I mean, now they've cut off electricity.
Yeah.
They've cut off road access. They, the amount of control and leverage that Israel has in that situation.
Yeah.
The question of, would Palestinians want to live in a pluralistic, secular Israel?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to. But for the time being, I think the question shouldn't be on what is the political, dynamic in Palestine. Because one of the realities is the political dynamic of Palestine has been destabilized explicitly. Like, civil society has been actively undermined over and over and over again to give rise to organizations like Hamas, right?
Yeah.
So there would need to be significant work done by so many parties to rebuild, Palestinian civil society.
Yeah.
And to rebuild it not in some sort of westernized, like we're going to rebuild Iraq kind of way, but to actually genuinely work with people to allow human flourishing. But that's not where we're at.
We are not even stopped. The war is still on.
We're at, the 11th hour, 100 seconds to midnight, and it's not ideal.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was another question in what you had asked.
So another question I wanted to ask you was that, so there's a difference, like how different is the idea of Israel in Torah versus what the idea of modern Zionist vision is, the idea of how Israel should be, and is there people, do you know that culturally, or religiously, or a mixture, very weird mixture of both, they follow or they want the vision of the Torah, or is it just something that was there but not really the focus now?
The Torah isn't a great place to start to think about this. The Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh.
Okay.
In Christianity, it's known as the Pentateuch. But yeah, so those basically detail the early origins of Jewish religion. They were verbally passed down until they ended up being codified.
Yeah.
Don't shoot the messenger. I'm not an expert on this. 800-ish BC?
Yeah, I mean, it was there.
A while ago.
A while ago.
But it was an oral tradition before that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the term Israel just sort of means the descendants of this particular guy. So Abraham had some sons, and, they had some sons, and they had some sons, and one of them in the generations was given the name Israel.
Yeah.
Because he wrestled with an angel, and then his sons were the 12 sons of, I think it was Isaac. Again, I'm an expert on religious nationalism.
Yeah, but the
specifics of Judaism. But, so then what ended up happening was you had basically, to give you a real flash through the whole Hebrew Bible, which details a lot of this history, you got, a tribal society that's governed in emergency situations. They come together under a judge. You got that for a while. And then they do a kingdom, and there's some stuff about that.
Yeah.
Those kingdoms fall apart, and they split into different things. They're conquered a couple times. Flash forward, it's the Roman period. Jesus, flash forward again, 79 years. And you have the destruction of the Second Temple.
Okay.
Now, Second Temple Judaism, the first temple got destroyed by the Assyrians. Fact check me. The Assyrians.
Fact check.
The Babylonians.
The Babylonians.
Babylonian exile. Thank you.
Don't forget to fact check.
The Babylonians got, kicked in the face by the Persians, and the Persians let them go home. So they rebuilt and they built a second temple in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And then that temple got destroyed by the Romans during a war with an uprising of Jewish communities there.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the ancient history. And then the diaspora happened from there.
Yeah.
Jews were expelled from Palestine, and then they wound up across the world forming different communities. Were Jewish communities in India, there were Jewish communities in China. A lot of them wound up in Europe because they were part of the Roman world. A lot of them wound up in Africa because it was part of the Roman world. And the Middle East, and a lot of them wound up as well. The difference now is that with Jewish imaginations of Israel now is they're not trying to recreate like a Jewish kingdom ruled over by, like a King Solomon figure. They're trying to create a modern nation state.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But they're basing it off of, the Jewish claim to the land historically, the Jewish claim that it is the promised land, if you want to sort of add a religious valence there. Because they come and go from the land a lot. That's a theme, historically, is there's a lot of coming and going from Israel.
Yeah.
And so the idea of the return there is sort of, there's a catharsis to it, right? To sort of, after 2,000 years in the wilderness, to be able to go back and establish a state for your people in the land that you had historically inhabited until you were sent, into the wilderness to be prejudiced against by European powers. I mean, that's something. European powers, I say, because their anti-Semitism, while there was a degree of anti-Semitism in the Ottoman Empire and in other regions where Jews lived, it was sort of systematized in Europe for a number of different reasons.
So why was this? Why is sorry.
So anyway, there's so many differences between the modern Jewish state in Israel and the ancient kingdom of Judea or the ancient kingdom of Israel, because those are two different things.
So now at least people like you and me, they don't really care about that. They're probably care about that, but it's mostly about having a place which could be possible within the frameworks of a nation state as of
within
now.
the nation state model, exactly. Which gives rise also to the questions of territorial claim.
Exactly.
To have a nation, one needs a state over which to rule, right? A land.
Yeah.
And so, Jewish movement into Palestine had begun well before 1948, but it was in 1948 with the creation of the Jewish state and the UN mandates that you have the rise of an actual entity.
Yeah.
Before
as someone
conceptual.
Every country recognizes as a nation state, as the land.
Well, not every country.
Oh, not every country, yeah.
Importantly, not
ones
every
that matter. No. Importantly.
In the end.
Not every country.
Israel's still here, so.
Yeah. 16, I was reading up, it's almost since the past 20 years, or so 23 years, since 2000, there were 16,000 or something, at least 10 to 15 times more Palestinians killed compared to how many Israelis killed. So by that ratio, if we just project it, there's been loosely 1,500 Israelis killed this time. So are we looking at 16,000 Palestinian deaths before Obviously, that's just hearsay. I'm just being
it's an
a dick, I guess.
extrapolation from the previous statement.
I hope like they get into a resolution. I don't know how Ian. I hope they just like broker it like as soon as possible.
Yeah, I
Somehow
honestly don't know exactly what we're looking at.
Yeah.
I think we are looking at, every group of people, to some extent, in order to close ranks, right, and form the group, needs an other, whether that's the other that's oppressing them,
That's true.
or just someone that they're different from.
That's true. You still
They
keep
can enact
them to
violence
unite
against.
your people upon like have a topic of.
There's this notion that peace requires some degree of like anterior violence.
Yeah.
And here I think what we're seeing is the peace that's desired. A large number of people in the Israeli government, in the American government, in the European governments.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Indian guys on Twitter.
Yeah.
The peace that is desired requires so much violence to enact because they are looking for a peace that is the end of the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
I mean, who is that guy? Some guy on Twitter. I deleted Twitter, so I can't even check.
Oh, yeah.
But some guy on Twitter posted an image of, Palestinians as insects, vermin to be crushed under the boot of the IDF. And it's like, that happened. We did that. We tried. Human society has produced instances where these sorts of images have spread around. And the consequence was very bad. And, I'm not going to rehash World War II, but it didn't work out so well for everyone involved, in the end.
Yeah.
And whether that was by sheer coincidence or whether that's the moral arc of the universe bending towards justice, I don't know. But the goal should be now, with hindsight, to not do things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what that does is it contributes to a dehumanization.
Yeah.
That not only says, we are different from this group, but this group is so different from us, they don't matter. Their human experiences can all easily be just brushed aside and they can be painted as vermin to be exterminated.
Yeah.
And it's horrifying. That logic is so normalized.
Yeah.
It's perceived as normal when in reality, it's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Like, there needs to be a line drawn, right? Where posting something like that just gets you expelled from society until you, own up to what you did and work to undo it. It's crazy, but it's also just how the world works. And it's kind of, it's fucked up to me.
Yeah. So what Hamas did, I mean, Hamas once doesn't recognize any Jewish state, of course. Not even to pay the respect of recognizing the state that they want to probably take over.
Right.
They don't do that, but there's their whole aim is to do the same thing. Not the same thing, probably worse. They want to kill everyone who recognizes as a Jew. That's what their motive is, right?
I don't think that's what their motive is.
Okay.
Because
that's been I have heard that's what their motive is.
There's this question of
why do they have retorted to such violence?
What's we liberate Palestine, what does it look like?
Yeah.
Right? The question of a liberated Palestine for Palestinians has to include the millions of Jewish people who live there now. If we're doing sort of a land back question where we give back land that was stolen, then we can do a renegotiation maybe of the 1948 boundaries. We start talking about repatriation of land that was stolen in recent years by Israeli settlers in the West Bank. Repatriation of specific homes to specific families. Yeah. And what the logistics of that look like. That's a series of questions that require some degree of reconciliation and some degree of cognizant hard work. That's not what Hamas is after.
Yeah. Hamas is like...
But Hamas is not after the genocide and expulsion of the Jewish population in Israel, because that's impossible. It's literally never going to happen. It's not even within the realm of hope, right? And I think Hamas knows that.
But
I think Hamas
they just want revenge more.
I think it's posturing. I think they believe, and while I'm not an expert on Hamas myself, I'm more an expert. I'm far more an expert on the RSS.
Okay, shit. That's another video, of course.
If you want me to talk about the Songhees, we can talk about the Songhees.
Yeah.
And I'm, South Asia is my area of focus, so I'm extrapolating a little bit about what I know from that context here.
Yeah.
But I think what Hamas wants is they want short-term political power, immediate control, and they want to inflict pain against the people that they view as oppressing them. I think that's what a lot of the people who go out and do the terrorizing want, Hamas leadership.
Yeah.
I think they thought they could strategically get something from this. Maybe
some sort of
pick up a couple hostages.
Yeah.
And, get some sort of port access. That's not what happened. What happened was violence got out of hand. I don't think Hamas, strategically speaking, it's very stupid what Hamas did.
Exactly. Right?
It is repugnantly stupid.
I mean,
it is evil.
There
it is dumb.
much lesser, much easierly, not easily, but this could be done, what you're saying of what they want, with much lesser casualty than what Hamas caused. So this is that's why, it's a terrorist group.
It's a terrorist group. It is an Islamist, far-right terrorist group.
Yeah, so
I think they do genuinely probably desire, to some extent, a reunified Palestine under their control. But I think they know that that's not achievable with any sort of reality.
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of what does the RSS want? Do they want a Kand Barat?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but are they going to take over Myanmar anytime soon? The BJP's in power, why haven't they done it yet? Because they can't.
They can't. They
can't.
don't actually...
It's not possible.
Yeah.
But it's a good posturing tool.
Yeah.
And it gets people to commit horrible and insane acts of violence that perpetuate the continued ascent of people who politicians who feed off of that violence.
Yeah.
It's a self-repeating loop. I have no doubt that Narendra Modi probably dreams of a Kand Bharat, but I think he's also a sensible man. And yet he probably,
He probably knows that that's what possible. That's what.
Yes.
That there's a limit.
I'm not trying to say that the politicians are conning you and don't genuinely believe in these things. There might be a sense to which they believe in it aspirationally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're also confined by reality.
Yeah.
And so I think Hamas as a terrorist organization,
they don't know that that's
their goal cannot be that, because it's impossible.
Yeah.
You sort of have to think about what is their goal, right?
It's
to inflict terror and it's to cause pain.
Yeah, but that's just a terrorist group within that operates that controls a part of Palestine.
Yeah,
but there are definitely
2006.
Not every Palestinian wants that.
No.
A lot of Palestinians would, before this war, or probably before that as well, they probably would have accepted a one-state solution where they live as minorities within a Jewish state. Is that it? Or they really, even though...
the options... saying to live as a perpetual minority is to basically, condemn yourself to a situation where your sovereignty as a group is always at someone else's discretion. And the thing is, right, that's something that some groups may be okay with, that's something some groups may explicitly not be okay with. The question has to become... and the question has to become less what should happen next and more, we're in the pickle we're in.
Yeah.
Palestinians now, here's another question, right? To sort of help fill it in, right? Kashmir might be a good example. after the 80s and 90s, if you asked a Kashmiri person, do you feel Indian? You proud of what, the Indian Defense Forces have done? They probably would say no.
Yeah.
It was a terrible time.
Yeah.
But nowadays, there's an extent to which Kashmir has mellowed.
Yeah. Because of the economic development that's supposedly happening now. I haven't seen it myself, but I'm sure.
They do cut off electricity quite frequently for no particular reason.
Yeah.
But regardless, the point there is there should be some degree of sympathy for the opinion among Palestinians that they don't view Israel as a potential partner. They only view them as an aggressor.
Yeah.
Even though Hamas has committed terrible atrocities, does that excuse within 24 hours them making 300,000 people homeless? At a certain point, the fucking chicken or the egg, where does the violence begin, where does it end? The question is, who do you expect to behave better? A caged people or a member of the UN with nuclear weapons? We should treat everyone as adults.
Yeah.
But there is an extent to which you have to acknowledge that Palestinian resistance to Israeli aggression may not always look the way we want it to look. Mm-hmm. And it can never excuse things like decapitating babies.
Yeah.
Right? But we shouldn't go, well, they're either terrorists or they are going to join Israel in a kumbaya situation. There's going to be antagonism. There will, of course, be. And so I think the question becomes, how do we in the West understand that antagonism and simultaneously make amends for what has happened?
So, on that note, I think this is a perfect way to end it. So, people, that was Jack Quain. You can find Jack Quain in academia, or what are those journal papers?
I don't know. You can find me on the street.
Jack
you can find
can
me
be found
in
on the street.
Bed.
Jack can be found on the bed.
You can find me under the Charles River.
Under the Charles River.
4:32 p.m. on Tuesday, October 19th, 2063.
And you can find us on YouTube.
I'm going to be thrown there by the mafia.
Okay.
That's what the witch said. Anyway, bye.
Okay, bye. Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know what you think about that. There's no resolution to the conflict. We hope that they reach it as soon as possible, and then
I just hope cooler heads ultimately prevail.
Cooler heads ultimately prevail.
Whoever those are.
See you at the next one.